Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the President's inaugurational address on the future of work. Before we start, just a few webinar considerations. Attendees are reminded to ensure the volume is turned up on their device. Ensure you have a stable internet connection. This will ensure the streaming and audio will run smoothly. Attendees can ask questions via the questions panel located within the GoToWebinar control panel. By default, the control panel is located on the right-hand side of your screen. The chat function is reserved for webinar organizers and panelists to communicate with attendees. Attendees will not be able to chat with each other, however, are encouraged to ask questions. A recording of this talk tonight will be made available on the SAIE YouTube channel, the SAIE TV. The recording will also be made available on the SAIE website under the Events drop-down menu in the section Past Events and Webinars. This page is updated regularly, so ensure you check back as often as possible for new uploads and subscribe to our YouTube channel. A certificate of attendance will be issued a few days after this webinar once we've received the CPD validation from EXA. I'd like to introduce you now tonight to our Deputy President, Mr. Prince Moyo. Mr. Moyo is a fellow of the SAIE and became a member in 1996. His academic qualifications include an MBL in 2015 from UNISA, a MSc Eng 2001, a GDE from WITS, a BSc Engineering Honours in 1993 from University of Zimbabwe, and he has 25 years work experience. Mr. Moyo specializes in the specification of all low voltage and high voltage AC and DC equipment up to 765 kV. His team comprises of approximately 420 engineers, technologists, and technicians. His key experiences include rural electrification designs, distribution, and a project portfolio of 1.7 billion rand annually, and reviewing maintenance strategies for all asset classes. Prince is actively involved as a SAIE council member, and as I said previously, is now our Deputy President of the SAIE. Mr. Moyo.
Thank you, Minx, and I welcome again to our members and guests this evening. We have an exciting talk by our new president, his presidential address for the year, which is titled Future of Work. And I will read the synopsis, and then I will read the bio of Prof. Sunil Maharaj, and then I will hand over to him to start with his presentation. His address tonight is titled Future of Work, the Future of Work. And the synopsis reads as follows. Industrial revolutions have transformed our societies and the workplace over the years. Hence, the world around us changed fundamentally and will continue to change. Digital transformation has triggered essential alterations in how we live, work, socialize, and study. There is a growing concern by industry, academic scholars, leaders, and unions globally on the future of work. Transitions of technology have seen robotics, artificial intelligence, drones, Internet of Things, virtual and augmented reality, amongst others, taking over the workforce at a rapid pace. These changes raise important questions. Are our jobs secure? Do we have the right skills for future work? Will digital transformation discriminate worse than our recent history of apartheid? And these changes present organizations with an opportunity to overcome the nature of treating humans and machines similarly. But instead, we need to build networks that can pave a secure and innovative path moving forward. The address tackles the current technological trends that the workplace is confronted by and the impact of these on society. Around the world, some organizations are already feeling the impact of digitalization to different extents. The address further aims to look at the various skills that the future workforce will need to equip themselves in the changing environment, raising questions such as how could the world embrace 4IR and beyond? Will these technologies rekindle economic growth and transformation? Will we revitalize skills and create high-quality jobs in large volumes as we need? The importance of the human touch is still required in this technology-driven world. Skills like leadership, deliberation and debate, conflict resolution, and ethical considerations for decision-making are needed if we are to have holistic results. Through all these technology debates, there is a clear consensus that the changes are fundamental and evident. Organizations and thought leaders should keep in mind the expectations and needs of these varied skills when making decisions. The address will attempt to provide some thoughts on how we position the SAIEE to play a more prominent role and exploit its comparative and competitive advantage in this ecosystem. The biography of Prof. Sunil Maharaj reads as follows. He is a full professor in the Department of Electrical, Electronic and Computer Engineering and currently Dean of the Faculty of Engineering, Built Environment and IT at the University of Pretoria, South Africa. He has a combined experience of more than 32 years in industry as a microwave and radio frequency design engineer, an academic and a consultant. He holds a BSc Engineering Electronic, MSc Engineering Electronic, MSc Operational Telecommunications, and a PhD Engineering. He is also a professional engineer registered with EXA, a fellow of the South African Academy of Engineering, a fellow of the SAIEE, a senior member of IEEE. He joined the SAIEE in 1997. He has been the IEEE South Africa Section ComSoc Chapter Chair for 5 years, and since 2018, the founding chair of the IEEE SA Section Vehicular Technology Society. He has been involved in organizing many conferences and technical events such as IEEE Africon, IEEE ICC 2010, and General Conference Chair for IEEE VTS, Wireless Africa Conference, and World Engineering Education Federation, as well as Engineering Deans Council Conference. He is the first African Dean to be elected as the Global Engineering Dean Council Chair and will assume the chair position from November 2021 to 2023. Sunil has more than 155 international peer-reviewed conference and journal articles, 2 international patents. He is a winner of 10 national and international awards. His research interests are in wireless communications with focus on 5G cognitive radio sensor networks, resource allocation, OFDM MIMO systems, and wireless channel modeling. Over to you, Sunil.
Thank you, Program Director, Deputy President Prince Moyo. Thank you very much. Good evening to office bearers, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome. Thank you for joining us this evening, and wonderful to have all of you on this online event. So as Deputy President and Program Director Prince Moyo said, my topic today is on the future of work. And I'm happy to share some of the things that I have found and some of the things I suggest how we should look at it within the SAIEE. So my content for my presentation today is a short introduction, the future of work, some primary skills that have been alluded to in terms of the future of work, and of course, automation and its impact on employment. We are currently in the 4IR, and of course, beyond that, we need to look at it as well. The South African perspective and some ideas on what global perspectives have been or are, and technologies that matter most for organizations. And I'll talk a little bit on SAIEE and the road ahead, how it impacts us and what we can do. Obviously, it's not exhaustive, but some of the ideas and some concluding remarks going forward as well. So at the outset, I'd like to acknowledge basically the various people that assisted me during my putting this together, certainly colleagues at work in my faculty, and of course the SAIEE administrative and support staff. Thank you very much, and I really appreciate your help in taking this event and of course this whole development process forward. So basically this address debates the future of work, and of course there are a few things one can talk about, and of course the main things one can address in the future of work is the worker and workplaces. And certainly in this presentation, I hope to be about 30 minutes or 35 minutes. I mean, I cannot do justice for all three of them because they are quite exhaustive areas themselves. The work itself, the worker, and of course the workplaces, because the workplaces, as we know, since COVID-19 has accelerated the disruption in this. So certainly it's not possible to cover all these, but I think people need to think about this in a global context and within these three main you can call them sections. So I'll focus mainly on the work and maybe to some extent on the worker. So digitalization and automation have triggered essential alterations in how we live, as Deputy President said, how we live, work, study, and of course socialize. And that has impacted us quite radically going forward. And there's no doubt about that. Get this thing to go back to. And then, of course, the transition to technology saw the conception of robotics, AI, IoT, and so forth going forward. And of course, to some extent, taking over the workforce in some industries. And of course, the future of work is human-led. And certainly, I think sometimes people overreact and feel that there'll be no need for humans, or humans will get obsolete, or humans will only control machines. And I think there's a place for all in the ecosystem. But certainly, technology has been a catalyst and will be a catalyst going forward. And of course, how we sustain all this going together. Of course, the importance of the human touch is still required, and it will always be required. And of course, things like leadership, cognitive thinking, those are important aspects that machines may be able to do some extent, but I think humans will still play a very, very important role in that. And of course, things like conflict resolution, ethical considerations, and how to interact and to get sense of group dynamics and those important things. And I think one of the things that I think if we look at from the first industrial revolution to the fourth, the idea of losing jobs has always been there, and this, yes, and people were always apprehensive about people getting unemployed. But if you look at it over the years, from the 1800s to now, people have always got employed, and more people got employed. So in my view, I think there will be shedding of jobs, no doubt about that. But I think there'll be always opportunities for more and more employment, because with technology, we'll need people to do different things and more things, but differently, of course. So I think the opportunity is great. So we must see the opportunities rather than seeing the negativity. And of course, organization and leadership keep in mind the expectations and needs and the skills as important decision-making process. And to thrive, of course, we need to focus on the people as much as on the technology, because people drive things. People are the engine room for all these things. So as COVID-19 pandemic drives profound societal changes and opportunity to return to work by designing future work, so how do we build organizations and how do we execute them in times of crisis? With the rest of the world, we watched in disbelief what happened to COVID-19, like I said, the pandemic, and how it accelerated innovation and disruption at the same time. And of course, the danger of workers losing jobs or being given what we may call short time or limited time in work, or maybe given a reduction in pay cuts and so forth. So those are things that happened. And of course, it reconvinced us or reinforced our conviction that we are not separate from the advances, and that important for organizations to capture all these and how to use the full value of technology in the rightful place and within the rightful ecosystem. Of course, it presents unique every dark cloud has a silver lining, and certainly this is important in this case. And how these crises presents organizations, it causes disruption. It's like having a tree full of fruit and shaking the tree, and certainly the dry ones or the rotten ones will fall down. And certainly, how do we shake this tree, this organization, and how do we reinvigorate it? And of course, the business leaders, the three things that they need to do going forward in their organization. So these are the 10 primary skills, I think, for the workforce of the future. This is not mine. This is something you'll find in the literature. Certainly, World Economic Forum, when they presented this, when they presented 4IR, when Professor Klaus Schwab presented this. And this is becoming more and more important from our own experiences in the workplace and also from what we see from research. Of course, creativity is always important. For innovation, we need creativity. Creativity is a precondition for innovation. So emotional intelligence, analytical, critical thinking is becoming more and more important in terms of that. Active learning with a growth mindset, how we continuously improve. And of course, judgment and decision making. So we need to make decisions all the time, and sometimes difficult decisions that may not be palatable to some of us, and sometimes we need to make those tough decisions. Interpersonal communications, diversity, of course, will come with that, and leadership skills. Cultural intelligence is becoming quite an important thing as we see the challenges in the world, not unique to Africa or South Africa. We see that in first world countries, that how they're grappling to deal with diversity and cultural intelligence in society and also in work. And diversity, there's enough evidence to show diversity enriches innovation and enriches how we do things for the improvement of society at large. And of course, technology skills are important. We should not ignore that, but not make it the be and end all. And of course, embrace change. As they say, sometimes change is the only constant in life. So I think I've covered these things here. And then now, basically on embracing change, we'll present to you a short video clip.
COVID-19 is one of the biggest crises of our time. It has impacted every single one of us, shaken our social systems, and disrupted every sector of our economies. The automation of work, combined with the global recession, led workers to lose their jobs at an accelerated pace compared to previous years. And this trend is expected to continue. The ongoing shift in the division of labor between humans, machines, and algorithms might displace 85 million jobs worldwide in the next 5 years, while 97 million new roles, ones that are more adapted to this new task distribution, may emerge. By 2025, companies expect to displace roughly 6% of their total workforce. 1 in 2 workers will need reskilling, and those remaining in their current roles will need to update 40% of their skill set to adapt to the changing labor market. There is a way to collectively benefit from these challenging times. Decades of research have shown that the most valuable asset of any economy or company is its human capital. Around the globe, companies are already experiencing a shortage in relevant skills for future roles and are investing in reskilling and upskilling their workforce. By 2025, organizations say they will train over 70% of their employees to ensure they can smoothly.
Excuse me, ladies and gentlemen. Mr. President, if you don't mind, I can share my screen and show the video to our attendees.
Please go ahead.
Thank you.
COVID-19 is one of the biggest crises of our time. It has impacted every single one of us, shaken our social systems, and disrupted every sector of our economies. The automation of work, combined with the global recession, led workers to lose their jobs at an accelerated pace compared to previous years, and this trend is expected to continue. The ongoing shift in the division of labor between humans, machines, and algorithms might displace 85 million jobs worldwide in the next 5 years, while 97 million new roles, ones that are more adapted to this new task distribution, may emerge. By 2025, companies expect to displace roughly 6% of their total workforce. 1 in 2 workers will need reskilling, and those remaining in their current roles will need to update 40% of their skill set to adapt to the changing labor market. There is a way to collectively benefit from these challenging times. Decades of research have shown that the most valuable asset of any economy or company is its human capital. Around the globe, Companies are already experiencing a shortage in relevant skills for future roles and are investing in reskilling and upskilling their workforce. By 2025, organizations say they will train over 70% of their employees to ensure they can smoothly transition into the jobs of tomorrow. These include DevOps engineers, artificial intelligence specialists, digital marketing managers, talent acquisition specialists, and customer success specialists. It will take on average between 2 weeks and 5 months for workers to pick up new skills, allowing them to move into these new roles. But data shows they won't need to have the perfect skill set to start transitioning. While 2/3 of employers expect to get a return on investment in employees' reskilling programs within just 1 year, governments will also need to step in to update and fund education and training systems, and to ensure displaced workers have adequate safety nets. With purposeful leadership and collaboration, we can turn this global crisis into a unique opportunity to transition into a future of jobs that is inclusive, fair, and sustainable.
Mr. President, I will just do your slides for you.
Okay, I think I'm fine now.
Shall I make you presenter again?
Yes, please.
Sure.
Okay, I hope you can see my slide.
Not the right display settings, sir. Change your display settings to SAP presenter view.
Can you see my slide?
Sunil?
No.
No, it's the wrong display settings.
Hello?
It's the wrong display settings.
Mr. President, you should have display settings at the top, the middle option.
Yes, now go into presentation mode. To the right, it's next to the minus.
Yeah, I've got that.
At the bottom of your screen is the presentation mode. There we go.
Yeah, I've got that. Can you see it now? Can you see it now?
No, your display settings are still wrong.
Yeah, so while you are there, Mr. President, just go to the top middle. At the top, it says display settings. If you can click on the arrow at the top there, display settings in the middle, where the SAIE logo is, just the top bar of your screen, it will say display settings. To the left, on top of the well.
No, I don't see that.
All right, otherwise we could proceed like this. We just then happen to see your next slide at the same time, but we could proceed like this. I'm sure. Yeah, there you go. There you go. There you go. Swap.
Can you see that?
No, you needed to select the swap. Yeah, there you go. There you go. Thank you.
Can you see it now?
Yes,
Okay,
as it should be now.
Why do I have this? Okay, so let's look at automation and its impact on employment. So there are pros and cons for that. Get it one side. So certainly in terms of more efficient production, higher labor productivity, cheaper goods, we avoid boring, repetitive jobs, and of course, shorter working week. And we already heard that recently in Europe, there's a lot of discussions on shortening the working week. And of course, safety and certain removal of certain human errors for safety of people. And of course, giving a greater choice for consumers out there. And certainly it has cons as well. Some workers could be displaced, create winners and losers, and maybe some inequality. Automation could increase monopoly power, and that's something that could be a concern to some. And of course, loss of human interaction, because sometimes you can have things automated, and of course, lack of empathy sometimes with events. Now I can't get my slide to move now.
The bottom left of your arrows.
Yeah, you could use your arrows as well.
The arrows on your keyboard, the right arrow would go to the next slide.
Nothing's happening.
No, click on the PowerPoint. Just use on your keyboard, use your right arrow.
Can you see that now?
That's pros and cons.
This is a bit of a disaster.
Can I handle the slide?
Yes, I think so, because this thing is kind of freezing up here.
Okay, no problem. I'm making myself presenter.
Sorry, colleagues, about this, but this is technology.
You should see your next slide now.
Yes, thank you. Yes, so this is basically talking about, this was a survey done, of course, of 24 countries, or 25 countries, sorry, in terms of assessing their, basically in terms of the skills, training, and in terms of the innovation environment, and how prepared are they for automation. And you can see South Africa has come out third last, 22 out of 25, they basically are. So it shows that we are not very prepared in terms of automation. That's on average, of course. Some industries are much more prepared than others, but certainly not all of them. Thanks. Minx, you go next one. So this is something on, we're talking about multidisciplinary teamwork. And this is some of the top cross-cutting specialized skills. So this is, we want to do every one of them, a snapshot, basically. If you look at, for example, product marketing, some of this emerging job clusters you'll find there, for example, will be data, AI, people and culture, marketing, product development, and sales will be part of that cluster, and people will have that kind of multifaceted kind of knowledge base. Of course, if you look at digital marketing, for example, content, data, AI, marketing, product development, and sales. You look, for example, let's say number 9, computer networking. It's not only about writing software, it's about cloud computing, data, AI, engineering, and sales becomes an important part of that. Or if you look, for example, at number 14, which is data science, it is data and AI marketing and product development. So these are kind of things, how the nature of a job has changed, and whether the silo mentality we had and we were used to kind of, we need to break those going forward. Thanks, Mings. So we know South Africa in terms of unemployment is quite high, and this is something basically from the future of works in South Africa. As we know, yesterday was statistics that given out to us from Stats SA in terms of unemployment being even higher, and that's creating a major challenge for us. And of course, with the 4R and digitalization and digital transformation, it can exacerbate that furthermore going forward. Next slide. So the action needed by stakeholders and how we can address this from a South African context. So of course, the three kind of pillars, if I put it so, or the tripartite alliance, or we may talk in those terms, is government, business, and the individuals, where government basically needs to embrace digitization, invest seriously in human capital, and of course to mitigate jobs impact through automation and foster a step up in job creation. And of course, business needs to rethink strategy, obviously, to become more competitive. And end of the day, business is there to make profit for their shareholders. And upgrade workforce planning and skilling is an important part of that, and embrace new ways of working. And whereas the individuals themselves need to focus on their skills, not just certification, and of course lifelong learning, and that's where the SAIEE can play a more important role in going forward. And of course target high growth sectors and find opportunities for entrepreneurship. And one of the important things that, for example, different countries have found different ways. And one of the things I found was quite innovative, which Singapore adopted a few years ago, is that they give every person a kind of a training voucher, and the training voucher allows you to do so many hours of training of your choice, and that helps them to reskill and upskill and to develop the talents that they would need to make them more marketable, and of course to add value to their job. And that's a win-win basically for everybody, for the industry, for the person, and for the economy going forward. And I think that's something we should really look at, maybe in South Africa through the VAs and the CETAs going forward. Next slide. Mings, you can move on. So this is a video basically to tell you something about how the WEF, World Economic Forum, sees the future of work.
If you're watching this, you're among the 3% of people that understand that the future of work is going to look very different from what it is now. So keep watching. Let's see where we're heading. It's also exciting, right? Siri will recognize your voice even if you're 5 meters away from your phone. That new chatbot feels totally real. Self-driving cars are no longer fiction. You can analyze your DNA. You tried flying that drone for the first time, and you're thinking of buying a smart speaker to make your life so much easier. A few years from now, and that's something like 3 years, not 30, artificial intelligence, robotics, machine learning, mass 3D print, biotechnology, chatbots, virtual reality, deep learning, drones, augmented reality, smart objects will all be deeply enrooted in our everyday lives. Just like computers, phones, or electricity are for us today. Oh well, is this really going to happen? And if it does, you'll adapt when the time comes, right? Life is good. You love your job. You've been working for this established company for a few years. You're comfortable in your position. You know what you're good at. People like you, and that last presentation you gave got you some amazing reactions. You're safe with your company. In the meantime, you see an article or two speculating on the future of jobs. McKinsey published a report stating that 45% of all current tasks could be automated with present technology. The World Economic Forum estimates that 33% of jobs in 2020 don't even exist yet. But what do they know, right? You've got time. Oh look, the supermarket just introduced self-cashier machine. You're at the airport checking in luggage. What the heck happened to all the real people at the check-in desk? Gone, replaced by machines. But it's only the low-skilled jobs, right? Nope, think again. In 2012, there were 150,000 humans working on Wall Street. 3 years later, automation has cut that number down to 100,000. That's 1/3 gone. But it's only the mathematical and scientific jobs, right? Nope. Again, this Japanese insurance company, Fukuoka Mutual Life Insurance, is already replacing all its human insurance claim workers with an AI system that will handle customers more efficiently. See these articles? They're written by algorithms, and we can't tell the difference with human written content. And thinking of converting yourself to being an online poker player? Too late. There's an AI that can already beat humans at it. Most journalists, tax consultants, marketeers, technicians, knowledge workers, lawyers, even the person editing this video right now will to some extent have been impacted or automated by technology in a couple of years. And what have you been doing? Probably watching Netflix. And the problem is the machines don't wait. And the machines, they don't watch Netflix. So what are the forces at play here? Basically, there's 10 million developers out there using increasingly simple and cheap technology to build new products and services. Some as young as 12 are already coding the future. Even that safe company you work for is increasingly under outside threat. And it's not just the Google, Amazon, Facebooks, and Apples of the world that I'm talking about. There are now tens of thousands of startups out there eating away at all sorts of jobs. Now, are they creating many jobs in the process? Let's look at some stats. Travel a bunch of years back to when Kodak ruled the world of photography. They were worth $38 billion and employed 140,000 people. That's approximately $270,000 per employee.
Our people work with pride to make Kodak a creative and innovative company.
Fast forward to recent times, YouTube sold for $1.65 billion with a mere 65 employees. That's $25 million per employee. Instagram, which had 13 employees and was sold for $1 billion. That's $77 million per employee. WhatsApp sold for $19 billion with 55 employees. That's a staggering $345 million per employee. So how is this all possible? Technology has allowed the emergence of what we call exponential organizations. These are exponentially fast-growing companies that leverage technology and require hire less people, but grow exponentially through technology. As this happens, job roles are slowly disappearing and being replaced by skill sets. Employers require you to know an ever-growing number of new and ever-changing fundamental skills in order to use the technologies they've implemented. Master the fundamentals.
Thank you. So that was basically, as you can see, it talks about the changes, but certainly one of the points of departure in that particular one was master the fundamentals. So the fundamentals are always going to be the fundamental building blocks, like any building, any big skyscraper out there. And I think those things are important. So technologies that matter most for business today. So, of course, we know about AI, we mentioned that, and of course, augmented reality overlays digital content and information on the world. Blockchain, we heard about blockchain, things like Bitcoin and so forth, and of course, drones, playing important parts in all areas, IoT, robotics, VR, and 3D printing. We're familiar with these technologies, so I'm not going to bore you with those things. But I think certainly what's important here is to see how this survey done in terms of business adaptation, particularly in this case, response to COVID-19 and the future. So if you look at this, 84% of the people surveyed, 84% of the employees surveyed, think that the acceleration of digitization in the workplace process is absolutely paramount importance. And of course, likewise, in terms of provide opportunities to work remotely, as we all experience that, accelerate automation of tasks and so forth. And you see, if you look at the bottom basically permanent increase workforce, very little. So certainly people are not going to increase their workforce, probably of COVID-19, even going beyond that. And of course, no specific measures implemented and temporarily increased workforce. So certainly the notion of increasing workforce is certainly not high in the agenda for anybody. And so those are important aspects in how we reskill people and they become more innovators and create job opportunities for themselves. Next slide. So beyond what's the global perspective on this? Of course, we know technology is changing the face of work at an alarming rate, and there's a huge responsibility to keep compliant and keep on moving. And of course, many organizations are expected to make changes in the locations. Of course, we mentioned things like working remotely and the value chains and the size of the workforce due to technology integration. And by 2025, it is predicted, this is based on World Economic Forum research, that basically the time spent on current tasks at work by humans and machines will almost be equal. But of course, what I'm saying is this may be true for some countries. It may vary from country to country. But countries that embrace it faster will be much more advantageous because of the competition and, of course, the efficiencies one may be able to obtain from that. And of course, the World Economic Forum proposes that redundant roles will decline from 15% workforce to 9%, and emerging professions will grow, certainly. And of course, I think we mentioned earlier in the video, certainly there will be job shed, but I think there'll be more jobs and new roles emerging going forward. Thanks. So what's the South African perspective on this? Some of the things we could think about going forward. So recent studies in South Africa raise some important questions, like how can South Africa embrace 4IR? And how can we rekindle growth? And something that's on basically our mind all the time, where we have the triple problems we have of poverty, unemployment, and inequality in this country. And of course, how can the country mitigate the risk of this from job losses? And of course, as we know, the job unemployment is sitting at a very scary high number. And of course, the impact of advancement of technology is disruptive. Surely it is. But like I said earlier on, it has enormous opportunities for us to enkindle our throughput, our income, and fiscal growth in the country. And of course, the probability to create much more jobs than we had. Like I said, I mean, all industrial revolutions shed jobs, but created more jobs. And certainly we need to embrace ourselves and position ourselves for that opportunity and to create that environment where we can have more jobs out there. So let's look at it in South Africa, the future in terms of digitization. And so this is some of the predictions done in the future of work in South Africa. And certainly there is predictions, and one might say maybe ambitious, but certainly we have to work towards this, is that certainly we can create real growth and real GDP improvement in this country, and per capita growth as well. We can go up from the current below 1% to 2.4%. And certainly we can increase, reignite the growth and job creation in this country as indicated in the slide. So, and I mentioned the three pillars that are important to work together, the national and the business and the individuals going forward. Next, Mings. So this is a slide basically showing you some of the key technologies likely to be adopted for different sectors. For example, it's a busy slide, but I'm not going to go through the whole thing. For example, if you look at the ones shown in basically brown, those are the ones 80% and above. You look at any particular sector, for example, if you look at the automotive consumer sector, they look at big data analytics is certainly quite a strong area. Cloud computing, for example, encryption and cybersecurity, IoT and connected devices, and so forth. And this tells you basically some of the key areas that are important for that particular sector, and that can help us to position ourselves to say, if those are important areas, how do we position ourselves as an institute to address that, so that we can address the needs of our members and of our corporate partners and corporate on a larger scale, so to speak, going forward. Next slide. So basically, this is a snapshot. Of course, in the video we mentioned some of the jobs. The snapshot is not exhaustive and not in detail. For example, IoT specialists for different kind of environments. IoT specialists in agriculture will be very different from an IoT specialist working in a mining environment, for example. I mean, app developers or cloud computing managers in terms of different professions, whether you work in the biotech or the sports science or the transport sector. I mean, cybersecurity is becoming an important aspect going, and of course, AI specialists, data analysts, medical practitioners, as the data scientists now, for example, you have an oncologist now, how to use data science in oncology, for example. As a medical practitioner, the whole game changes radically in terms of that. And we know, for example, with IBM's platform, but certainly Watson's platform, that's one example, but there are many other opportunities for other things to be done. I mean, robotic surgeon specialists. Now we know surgeons use robots, but of course now we need people to service those robots and become a specialist in those robots that needs for different kind of medical areas, for example, or in other facets of the corporate sector as well. And of course, VR and extended reality automation engineers. I mean, for example, if you use VR, for example, in a packaging plant, or if you're using VR or AR to develop another production line to support maybe some automotive cluster. And South Africa has a big automotive cluster. So there are big opportunities for changing the way that is done. And of course, there are much more and that's to your imagination and as things evolve going forward. So I'd like to, in the next slide, tell something about an example closer back to home. Now, we spoke about all these things, and some people might think this is far-fetched and pie in the sky. So this is one of the examples we are doing at University of Pretoria as an example of how we're looking at transdisciplinary work. And this is, for example, what we're looking at, what we call the Smart Evo. Now, as the name suggests, this is done by civil engineering colleague Professor Stein and the PhD student there as well. Basically, how we can help in the whole ecosystem, not only agriculture, but the whole ecosystem from what I call from seed to consumption, basically. And I'll show you the next slide, basically how this can be used. For example, this is used with avos, and this is a real project. It's being done now with the Avocado Growers Association. With these smart avos are incorporated with the avos to get a whole lot of data on different things, on temperature, humidity, vibration, and so forth. And in the next slide, I'll show you some of the ecosystem, which are called from the tree to the shop, basically. And why this is important in terms of economy, because think about it, if you increase the shelf life, and we all know if you go to Woolworths now to buy avos, how expensive they are, and anywhere else. So the objectives basically is how you quantify this and how you get more information so that you improve the whole process. And this is some of the, basically, as you can see, he's not plucking these avos from the tree, but showing you basically how he has these smart avos with the avos they're plucking in the tree. And so it's part of the whole thing to give you a whole lot of information, and it's largely data-driven, IoT-driven, and cloud computing-driven, basically. And the next slide will show you some of the electronics that goes into this thing. So as you can see, it's quite a sophisticated piece of equipment. It's got, of course, battery, it's got GPS in it, it's got vibration sensors, and it's got other sensors as well built into this, incorporated into this, and it looks and feels like an Evo, but it's not an Evo going forward. And so next slide will show you the complete ecosystem. So as you can see, it's an end-to-end transportation chain. It's transportation engineering in action. And basically you can see basically the process. So it's not only about agriculture engineering, it's not only about transportation from civil engineering or transportation, but it's also about data, it's about IoT, it's about intercontinental transportation, and how on cloud you can get the analytics all from the time, I said, from the farmer right to the time it's to the last mile target transportation network. So you can get information on this, and you can tell you a whole lot of things of that. And as you know, South Africa is a big exporter of avos, for example, particularly to the Netherlands and to Europe. And this can tell us a lot of information we can use for working out different things. And that, end of the day, helps to improve shelf life. End of the day, improves the economy, improves the income for the grower and all the different people in the supply chain. But also at the end of the day, basically, it's giving a better quality product to the customer as well. So this is showing about the transdisciplinary. So it's beyond about engineering and beyond about data analytics and data science. It's about agriculture, it's about economists, it's about packaging, low-skilled people working with these things and so forth. So this is just one example I can share that how we go forward in terms of a transdisciplinary piece of work. And basically, pretty much coming to the end. So the next slide, I'd like to talk about basically the 5 key realities. In South Africa, we have the big 5, we like 5 things. So I thought I'll call it maybe the Sunil's 5 key things here, basically. So the first one is the 3 T's, technology, talent, and transformation. So why this is important? Because 57% of the jobs are vulnerable to digital transformation, like automation. And we have to embrace this and go forward in terms of not technology, but the talent and how we transform our business from an operational point of view, like I said, from the worker, and the workplace. And of course, the rise of exponential organization. Now, this basically, what this means is that things are changing radically using all technology, software can do many things, and then of course, using crowd basically, or using skills on demand, or skills of the, basically what some people may call getting people from crowd in terms of doing work. So you don't have to hire people, and I showed you the previous slide in terms of people not looking at increasing the permanent force or looking at more temporary kind of workforce going forward. So these are important things going forward. And of course, lifelong reinvention. So one of the data showed basically the average half-life of learned business competency around 1994 was 30%. Rinks, can you please go back to the last one, previous one? Was about 30%. Whereas now we find now in 2014, the average half-life for learned business competency dropped to about 5 years in 2014. So what it says basically our half-life as in our competencies are getting shorter. Not going to zero, of course, but it's going to get shorter. And we need to find a way to reskill and skill ourselves. And that's why the important part is basically the lifelong learning, reinvention of ourselves and innovation. And of course, very important part is nimble enterprises. We need to be very agile. And one of the things that come about now is the gig economy, which we hear more and more about, especially during COVID-19. And it's predicted to basically, for example, the data I have is for the USA, it's looking at in a couple of years' time, 43% of the workforce in USA will be from the gig economy. And as we know, the gig economy basically is based on the free market system and based on flexible, temporary, and freelance jobs. And that's something may become more and more important. You have a certain skill, you have a certain expertise, and people will buy that and use that for that particular piece of work. And of course, it's based on some fundamental of using technology based on working online and working remotely, so you're easily accessible to people and to different people out there. And of course, I think ethics and of work in society is becoming more and more important with robotics out there. And I cannot emphasize that more, that we need to look at more and more of ethics in work and professional ethics going forward. And I think government and regulators are going to be very slow in catching up with this. So I think we as professionals and VAs and industry need to start setting a pace and setting certain principles that we need to abide by going forward in the world of robotics and AI. And then we can go forward. I can talk more on basically something that I suggest for us, the SAIEE. And as I mentioned, main thing is, and which Alvin Toffler mentioned, is the illiterate of the future will be basically those that have, those that cannot learn, relearn, and unlearn. So the SAIEE plays a very important part in that. And if I was looking at some of the offering of the courses we have, we certainly are not filling that gap adequately. And I think something we can offer to corporate and for the future of work, for example, something on Industry 4.0 and cover things like digital aspects, non-digital aspects that are important, and big data and data for basically not for techies, but for even for people in business and managers, and look at holistic view and implications of that and organizational integration approaches going forward. Something on thought leadership on smart cities, using IoT and some things that we talk about in our space, and how we're gonna embrace smart cities and how people working out there can look at these things. And of course, cybersecurity, things like digital forensics, cryptocurrency, and blockchain are important aspects. AI and machine learning in plant automation. And of course, quite topical in this country is prevention and detection of procurement and contract fraud. And maybe using things like machine learning, we can look at approaches and techniques and empower our members in that space. And of course, digital twinning is becoming very, very important in the automation and design and approaches. And these are some of the ideas, and I think there are many, many more. All our 6,000 members can come forward with very creative ideas on what we can offer and taking that forward to increase the value of proposition we give forward. And going forward, so I thought also we need to grow our membership. And again, the value proposition and offerings for our students. We need to add value to their careers and grow the next cohort of membership as a consequence of that. I think our main focus should be how we add value to students, and the consequence of that is to grow membership. And one thing is, for example, Ready for Work program, how we train people. And as I said, they learn fundamentals at university, they can learn certain things. But for example, in an engineering degree, you only can do so much in 4 years. And certainly I think we can offer Ready for Work program. We're offering the mentorships, and I think we plan to grow that, and it plays a very important and critical part. But certainly something like a Ready for Work program in terms of career planning, job satisfaction, and how you can enjoy and get the best out of your job, and how the employer can get the best out of you as well. And of course, workplace navigation, we spoke of diversity, multicultural or cultural intelligence, workplace navigation for future relevance, and of course, job preparedness and building your profile and a brand as an engineer. I think those are important aspects. And of course, some call it the soft or the softer skills for the world of work. And of course, hackathons, kind of things, having hackathons for students and getting people, again, from different institutions, different areas of the country, even from SADC, to work together and share and to build this kind of partnership and diversity. And those are important aspects going forward. I think we can embrace the SAIEE. So finally, in conclusion, I think although there is an ongoing debate on how the work environment is changing, there is a clear consensus that the changes are fundamental and evident, and we have to embrace it. As I say, if we don't embrace it, we're going to perish in the process, and certainly we don't want that. And of course, the stronger generation are looking for mentors, and I think we can play an important part in that. And organizations need to continue to strategize policies to accommodate this changing world of work. And of course, the expectations and needs of a diverse workforce, that's important as well. And of course, organizations and leaders need to keep in mind the expectations and needs of the varied skills when making important decisions. And how do we bring the skills in the changing world of work and embrace the diversity and see how we can exploit the diversity in an advantageous way going forward. So finally, in conclusion, I think the future is now, and certainly it is now, and the future is us, the people, the professionals, and the workforce. Like I mentioned, it's very important, and they are the bread and butter and the key things. And thank you, Program Director, and I'll end here. And if there are any questions, I'll try and answer them.
Thank you, Minx. You can go to questions, and let's pose them to the Prof.
We have our question from our immediate past president, Mrs. Sai. She's asking, are universities preparing the future students for this change in future work? And have they adapted their curriculums to these changes?
Should I answer all, or you give me a set of batch of questions and I can answer them?
That is the only question we have so far from the attendees.
Okay. All right. Okay. So I think I cannot speak for all universities, but I certainly can speak for our university. And certainly, as you know, I'm involved in the Global Engineering Deans Council, and that is made up of engineering deans from about over 200 countries. Certainly, that's why we have these discussions. And of course, it's not only deans, but engineering education as a whole. And certainly, people are discussing the future world of work, the type of skills. And that's why we also have a very important part of that forum called Industry Forum as well. And in that way, basically, every year there's a forum discussion between industry and academia about sharing what industry is looking for, and of course, what universities need to embrace and change, and what industries are looking for, and how this. So I think one of the things we don't do well in South Africa is this symbiotic relationship. And I think Germany is a very good example of that. South Korea is an excellent example, and the US to some extent, is where you have the partnership between industry, academia, and of course the student about sharing and sharing resources, and of course building infrastructure to offer the right training. But I think industries, universities, I think, in my view, if you look at certainly South Africa being part of the Washington Accord and the Dublin Accord and so forth, are always embracing these changes, and I think the curriculum is being adapted to address this. And certainly, largely, I think in terms of the graduate attributes at the capstone years, I think are embracing this going forward. And I can the example I showed you, for example, on my screen is one of the examples of the work that's being done to embrace some of these new changes in bringing a new technology, new ideas, and new ways of doing things. I hope that answers the question.
Thank you, Mr. President. We have another question from Professor David Nichols. Are we not in danger of abandoning the unfashionable but vital heavy engineering, such as heavy electrical engineering?
No, I don't think so. I think that's why in the slide I made, the World Economic Forum and the other one, I said the fundamentals, you have to master the fundamentals. That's absolutely important. That's a bedrock. That's a foundation. So heavy engineering, but I think the way you do heavy engineering is going to change radically with IoT and looking at neural networks and AI techniques and image processing. I think those things we need to bring in there to make things much more smarter For example, in terms of machine maintenance or maintenance engineering, that has changed radically now in terms of predictive analysis, using technology, using AI, using image processing. So I think we need to see how we bring all these things together. And so the traditional mechanical engineer, or the traditional power engineer, or the high voltage engineer, I think that needs to change, and to bring in other facets into it. For example, like I showed you, for example, the traditional civil engineer, the transportation engineer, who only knew about concrete and building roads or pavement engineering, and how that has changed in the example I've shown you there in terms of using IoT, data science, and using analytics for that. So I think we need to embrace these things and see how they fit into those things. So that's where the blurring of the silos are coming more and more prevalent. And I think how we can offer that to our members to see how they can add value to new things and new ideas, and of course, new innovations in their industry environment. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. President. We have a comment here from our past president, Mr. Andries Mtetwa. He says, thanks for a very interesting address. You're on the legal framework to keep up with these developments. Who do you charge for death caused by a driverless car?
That's a very, very interesting question. That's something that has come up a few times now, and that's why I talk about multidisciplinary work. For example, with autonomous vehicles coming on board, with basically, I mean, this is one of the, I don't have the answer to that, but I have more questions to that, is that basically insurance companies, or you look at, for example, now with autonomous vehicles, you're going to have a SIM card or using some kind of mobile operator to get data, for example, in location or pedestrians crossing or whatever the case is. Now, who becomes the insurance company? Is it the mobile operator or Outsurance or Sanlam or Santam, one of those people there? So those are important questions, and I think that's where the transdisciplinary work, how the legal vehicles and the engineers need to work together to see how we address these kind of things. I don't have the answer for that, and these are interesting questions, and these are questions that I posed about 3 years ago with my colleagues at university, that how we need to get the legal people to work with the engineers and the mechanical engineers, sorry, to answer these things and work together to address these things. So these are still unanswered questions, not only locally but globally, as we know in the US with the Google cars, the issues that and the fatalities that happen there. So these are things that are still so that's an opportunity going forward for us as South Africa as well, in terms of dealing with some of these things. Because certainly I think autonomous vehicles is not a question of whether it'll happen, it's a matter of when, and how we position ourselves as electrical, electronic, and computer engineers and mechanical engineers and others as well, to see how we work together to embrace that with the legal people and the financial people as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. President. We have also just a comment here from Professor Pat Naidu. Thank you for your leadership on the changing world of work. The need to reinvent careers whilst we reignite growth and create new jobs. Here, CPD and SLPs come to mind and offers an opportunity to all to embrace the change and to action accordingly. Thank you, and best wishes for a great innings as President. Thank you, Pat.
Thank you, Prof. Naidu.
We have another question here from one of our council members, Khomotso Setapelo. Has ethics as a subject in engineering curriculum also evolve with the times?
I think yes. So okay, I think it's becoming more and more important. Certainly, I think not only in engineering, I think in every discipline is becoming an important part. Like how you learn math and calculus, I think ethics is becoming just as important in my view in the curriculum. And certainly, yes, we are including it, and I'm sure others are as well in different ways. And I think it's something that will become very important, and that's where ethics come, and value systems are paramount. Those are fundamentals in everything in life. That's why we have things like corruption and so forth, because I think our value systems sometimes are being eroded, and sometimes our ethics are also becoming questionable. So yes, it's becoming a very important part, and certainly we have this in a first year module, by the way, not even in a capstone module. So I think this is becoming more and more prevalent, and certainly I think the SAIE as a course, I think ethics in robotics engineering or ethics in AI is something we also need to, I think about to offer as CPD, as Prof. Naidu said, to our colleagues, so that we make it more and more visible And I'm sure the market has some need for it. Obviously, we need to test the market for it because we only offer courses that are financially viable as well. Thank you.
Thank you. We have a question here from Ms. Charlene Masango. She says, interesting presentation, thank you. But she asks, you mentioned reskilling and upskilling. How do we best ensure that students understand this concept and interact with it? Mind you, they've spent 4 to 5 years in a classroom only to graduate and realize their skill set is nowhere near what is required in the changing world.
That's why I think I said that you need to learn, relearn, and unlearn. So those important things. And that's why I said in my suggestion that I think we as the SAIE can play an important role with our student body in terms of about the work package I spoke about there, and talking about the workplace and the workplace of the future. I think those are important things because, and how we bring the industry people. It's not, I think the industry people, our membership out there, we have a tremendous amount of brain power or talent out there, and how we harness that to bring that into this ecosystem of the SAIE to offer it to students. Because I think students generally, when they do a VAC job or internship, I think they learn a lot, and it's some awakening, but it's not enough. But I think when they go to industry and then they get a rude awakening sometime, and I think that's why we can cushion that or be an interface. But certainly in South Africa, we lost a lot in terms of the traditional Transnet and ISCOs, where people went into a full training program, engineering training program that hardly ever exists now. And generally industries have the mindset now that when you come out from university, you must be able to do this particular job in this particular industry and this scenario. And sometimes that's a bit unrealistic, but I think we need to create an interface on how we cushion that impact going forward. And that's why I said the work package suggestion is one. I'm not saying that's the only way, but as one way I could think of that we could add value to the student or the graduate, to the industry, and of course to our members at large as well.
Thank you, Mr. President. Our last question is from our newly elected Junior Vice President, Mr. Pascal Motsuasele. He's asking, what specific role do you envisage the SAIE sections and chapters, including the student chapters, will play in enabling the electrical engineering related careers of the future?
Mm-hmm. I think we have to work on the hub and spoke model, and that's I think the SAIE is built to some extent on that. We have all the different branches out there, and so I think they can play a very important part in their constituency because they on the ground they engage with their constituency, and of course whether it's members in the corporate space or whether it's members as students in the universities in that particular environment. And that's where I look in the work package things or certain training programs that how we as SAIE can develop in partnerships, and they can be the people that determine what is needed out there and how they roll it out. And so it's a two-way symbiotic process, and I think that's a very important way of doing these things. And all big organizations work like that. And that's why if you look at the picture on your screen there, it's showing about networks, building networks across the globe. I mean, we're trying to build networks in South Africa, and we need to strengthen our networks in South Africa, and hence from that cascade it to around the globe as well. Because we always don't have to reinvent the wheel. There are a lot of things out there we can use that are existing and available that we can use and incorporate and maybe adapt for the South African cultural landscape. And that can help us to leapfrog some of the things we need to do going forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. President. I hand you now over to our Deputy President.
Thank you.
Prof. Maharaj, thank you very much for an insightful presentation, thought-provoking. I was just thinking about the point that Prof. Dave Nichols raised about the poor heavy current electrical engineer. And I found comfort in imagining that all of this will need electricity and reliable electricity. So I think there is still room for the age-old heavy current electrical engineer, although I doubt that they will be paid anything close to these new careers. But yeah, we will still be necessary. So thank you very much for that. We've heard about the application in work itself, to the worker and to workplaces, And yeah, I think very early on you were clear to give us comfort that the future of work is human-led. So I think as we grapple with these contradictions, you've given us comfort that there is definitely room for the human, and mainly because of those soft skills that machinery finds difficult to master from the perspective of empathy, leadership, ethics. And what I also liked is the point about the fast progress, because these machines do not watch Netflix. So I assume they also don't take a tea break, a lunch break, or sick leave, which means we've got a real challenge ahead of us. And I think the takeaway for us is really for organizations to take note and not be shocked when these changes materialize. And then lastly, from my side, was just a takeaway that says, review the SAIEE offering from the perspective of the CPD courses that we offer. And there's probably room to introduce some of these concepts to the list that we have. Otherwise, thank you very much from the Institute. We wish you a very successful year, and please do challenge us to introduce these concepts and make them part of our programs. All the best for the year.
Thank you. Thank you, everybody, for attending.
Thank you. I think the session is over, and please do join us in our future advertised events online. Thank you.